In tonight's deep dive, a record number of young voters are now identifying as politically independent. According to a recent Gallup poll, at least 45% of Americans say that they are politically independent. That growth is led by Gen Z voters under the age of 30, more than half of whom choose to identify as such, in comparison with roughly a third of voters over the age of 65. So for more on this, I want to bring in Chad Peace. He is a legal advisor with the Independent Voter Project. Hey, Chad, thanks for the time. I wanted to ask you, how much of this is just, the label of independent now being in vogue right now?
Well, this trend has been happening for a long time, and I don't think it's in vogue. I think what you're seeing is a dissatisfaction with the leadership on both sides, right? You see it in congressional approval ratings. You see it in, people's opinions of their representatives. It's just that the younger generation has grown up in a period where their conversations, their friends, they all have these conversations so openly and on social media that if you take these divisive positions, these rigid positions where, kids these days have choices, a million choices on everything in their life, except when it comes to politics, they're told that they have to have two rigid opinions on either side, and they're rejecting that.
Do you think the DNC and the RNC are worried about this?
Well, I mean, they're always worried about how they can keep the voters into their camp, but I think both parties over the years, look, the primaries, primary elections, for example, came in to the public sphere at the turn of the century during the progressive era. That was because people believed that decisions were really being made in the smoke-filled rooms in the back room. Steadily over, the last 100 years or so, the rules have eroded the process of having public input. I mean, if you look at states like, well, we're right here in New York. I mean, we brought in ranked choice voting into the city, but that was a deal between reformers and the Democratic Party, knowing that in order to get it passed, they had to make a deal. Why did they do that? Because as long as the ranked choice voting was happening within a closed primary, the de facto winner gets elected by the Democrats, right? That's not just specific to New York, and that's not to pick on the Democrats, because the Republicans do it in states that they control. But younger generations they're wising up to the game. Now, will the rules change to reflect the sentiments of people? That's stuff that my organization is working on. But, whether voters tend to lean left or tend to lean right, that's true. But I think what you see in the numbers is that voters are tending to not have faith in the major parties to represent the complexity and the nuance of the average person's viewpoints.
Well, and Chad, you mentioned primaries, and we'll see the long arc of this. But I'm curious. I mean, what does this mean for states that have closed primaries ahead of this year's midterms?
It means that states that have closed primaries are de facto represented by a very small portion of the electorate. I mean, just go across the street to New Jersey. I mean, you have average turnout in these primaries of 10%. You have literally zero competitive elections in the general election. That means that elections are de facto decided in the primary. You only have to crunch a few numbers. Half of the New Jersey electorate has taken the active step of saying, I want to vote, but then also taken the step of saying, but I don't want to register for a party. The consequence of that legally is that they're precluded by state law from participating in a primary election that they fund. So they're saying, I register, but I register as an independent. I have to wait to the general election to vote. Well, guess what? Because of gerrymandering and a deal made between both parties, their vote really doesn't matter because it's that very small segment of the electorate that turned out in the closed primary that really is electing their representative.
Well, and listen, I understand that, but I also understand that, there are folks who would say that they're independent, even though they're in a closed primary state, and say that, hey, I want to be part of the primary process. And so, look, this is the side that I know that I'm probably going to weigh in, and I want to steer things a certain way. We've certainly seen that play out in some elections. Are you seeing independent voters like in New Jersey that would say, hey, I am going to actually register, but come the general, one party can't just count on my vote just because that's the affiliation that I have.
Right. I think that's what they want to feel, right? They want to be able to vote for whichever party or whichever candidate in the general election. The reality is, because of the construct of the rules, the real winner is de facto decided in the primary. So what you do see, and why registration trails. You see, this is a poll, 45% of voter sentiment is that they identify as independent voters. Well, why doesn't registration follow that? Because voters are really forced within the party structure to if they want to participate in a primary. I bet you could go across the electorate and find plenty of folks that would rather be Democrats in a Republican district or vice versa, but they register with the other party because they understand that the only meaningful opportunity they have to participate is to vote in the majority party's primary within their district. So, I don't think the election laws are reflective of the type of representation that especially the younger generations want. And that's what we'll have to see. That's why you're seeing efforts all over the country to open primaries, to create nonpartisan primaries, to bring ranked choice voting and different types of reforms.
Understood. Chad Peace, hey, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.